It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Let me explain what's happening in this video, because it is proof that we were right, that those of us who have been saying if it can happen to immigrants, it can happen to anyone, we're not the crazy ones. The video quality is poor because this wasn't posted by the White House or on any U.S. government channels. It's actually a Twitter post by the president of El Salvador of an exchange he had with Donald Trump prior to the televised press conference in which both mocked the Supreme Court decision ordering the return of a man illegally abducted and deported. But if you thought that was outrageous, which it is, this is where Donald Trump wants to take us. Listen.
I said, homegrowns are next. The homegrown's built. You got to build about 5 more places.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right.
He says, we want to do homegrown criminals next. You got to build about 5 more places. He's talking about U.S. citizens sent to gulags in another country where apparently they can never be retrieved. That is now the official position of our government, that the prisoners we sent to El Salvador and for whom we are paying the El Salvadoran government millions to hold cannot be returned even if ordered by a U.S. court. This is what happens when the actual crazies take over a government. Before the election, I spoke with Will Sommer about the growing extremism of the Republican Party and how it fed off the paranoia and conspiracy theories. Now that paranoia is in the White House. I invited Will back to give us an update now that many of the main architects of the right-wing conspiracy machine are running our government. As usual, Will does not disappoint. Here's our conversation. Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. My guest is Will Sommer, who writes the False Flag Substack at The Bulwark, where he brings to bear his deep expertise on right-wing conspiracies and extremist movements. Will, I've been loving the new columns. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Bring us up to date on how the crazies in MAGA land are dealing with the fact that they got everything they wanted. I mean, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are running the FBI. Laura Loomer apparently has veto power over staffing in the national security apparatus, but they're not happy.
You know, I was going to say, would it surprise you to learn that, they're angrier than ever? You're exactly right. I mean, in the case of Dan Bongino and Kash Patel running the FBI, in my latest newsletter, I talk about how they are, basically Dan Bongino is constantly having to take to Twitter to say, trust me, like, I know it looks like we're not doing anything, the arrests are right around the corner, essentially. And so there is this restlessness. I think MAGA people feel that the deportations aren't moving fast enough. I mean, they want the pain, in the case of RFK Jr., his anti-vaccine fans are mad because after 2 kids died from measles, he finally said, well, maybe you should get vaccinated for measles. I mean, there's this discontent, and it's almost like they're mad that the government is working with some amount of efficiency still, that it's not, just like a total shambles about, sending Hillary Clinton to Guantanamo Bay.
How much of it is incompetence on the part of these new government functionaries, Patel, Bongino, RFK Jr.? I mean, why are they so bad at doing what they said they would do? Have they realized that, if I do that, things are going to break? Or are they trying to and they just can't because they're not good at things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think certainly I wouldn't underestimate the level of incompetence. Like, for example, obviously, as we've seen with the tariffs, there's all this kind of backfilling of an explanation for, Trump is doing this like brilliant plan to restructure the entire global economy. And then we see that clearly that's not the plan because now they're falling all over themselves. And in the same way, I think there are these aspects of that. Someone like Dan Bongino, who was in right-wing media, I mean, he was very actively building up this audience and saying, we're out for blood. The Democrats are on the loose. Someone's got to rein them in. They're all criminals. And then when they get in, they realize, well, maybe I can't quite, completely purge the Democratic Party and send them all to a gulag quite yet. And so they built, and this is something we see over and over, is the right-wing media audience has these expectations built up and they throw them red meat. And then when Republicans are in power, they can't give it all to them. And then the base gets really mad.
What does that suggest to you? Does it imply that the provocateurs didn't really believe what they were selling, that Pam Bondi, when she would talk about Epstein, or Kash Patel and Bongino, when they'd really rile up their followers, they didn't actually believe it. It suggests to me that when they actually have to face reality and doing something about those expectations they set, they don't follow through because they never really bought into it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to that. I think in perhaps before, this is kind of a dog that caught the car situation, where before it didn't matter if there really is an Epstein client list, as there appears to not be. Pam Bondi is able to claim, the client list is on my desk, right? Up until the moment where it comes time to release it. And she goes, I think Kash has it over there. Kash, give me that list. And so, there's a way to kind of keep pushing these things forward and saying, well, they're at this, the deep state's hiding them from us. But ultimately, I mean, I think the people who follow them are kind of wising up to the fact that a lot of these promises aren't going to be delivered on.
And do their followers have any kind of loyalty to them? I should clarify, the them in this case, or the Bondis, the Patels, the Bonginos, or are they really susceptible to being turned on by that base as long as Trump is still able to capture their loyalty? Is there an opening here for wedging some of these people apart, as you began to see between Bondi and Patel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only guy the base is loyal to is Donald Trump. I mean, anyone could be scapegoated or tossed under the bus. I mean, the idea that even when I was writing my newsletter and it went out, and then Dan Bongino sent a new tweet saying, I'm not on vacation, guys. I'm working really hard. I mean, he's feeling the heat. And I think someone like Kash Patel or Pam Bondi is as well. In the case of RFK Jr., already people like Candace Owens, these other kind of right-wing media figures, are saying, he's being sexually blackmailed by Israel. I mean, just crazy stuff. But you can see that they're lining up things to find scapegoats. I mean, in the case of, obviously, there's some of the tariff and the craziness with the bond market. I think we're seeing that someone like Scott Bessent, who was praised when the market went up as this kind of just genius, that's a guy who used to work for George Soros. And I think as things continue to go south, we're going to see things align where they start saying, this guy was a saboteur.
Wow. There's this other theme within Trump world, at least the inner circle, that if you start holding people accountable, the veneer of strength and invincibility goes away. It gives added life to some of the stories that they would just rather move beyond. Signalgate's a great example of this, because if ever there was a scandal that demanded accountability and resignations, it's the divulging of classified information over an unclassified net. But they seem to be saying, nope, we're not going to dismiss anybody, even if they deserve it, because that just gives fuel to the opposition. Do you think that is protecting some of these other people as well?
Yeah, I mean, completely. I think, Signalgate being the most, I think the clearest example of something that really should have justified in any previous administration, even the previous Trump administration would have justified some firings, some resignations. But I think Trump has, kind of is going by these Roy Cohn rules of never apologizing, never admitting fault. And when you do that, there's always going to be something new that, if they could last out the week as they did with the Signal controversy, then there's something new for people to focus on. And with Democrats, if they don't control any parts of Congress, they can't launch investigations. It's hard to kind of move the ball forward.
There's not enough men like me who do whatever they want.
Are you sick of it yet?
Those people need to be, when we take power, they need to be given the death penalty.
The anger.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Shank. I live as a capitalist.
The hate.
And we have a system of checks and balances. That's a good one. That's really funny. We do?
The idea that to be a man, you have to be a bully.
Fuck you!
We should be better than this.
Females don't have independent thought. They don't come up with anything.
Our kids deserve better than this.
It's like women want equal rights when it's convenient, but then they still want the door open for them.
So help us change it. Subscribe to Valor Media Network, where you can find shows on sports, men's health, and patriotism without the resentment and division.
True strength is about discipline, resilience, and service.
If you've wondered where all the positive role models are, especially for young men, check out Navy SEAL Dan Barkov and Commander Bobby Jones as they share stories of service and sacrifice.
Being good at being a man is about what you do for others and not what you do for yourself.
Listen to Jason Kander and co-hosts Ravi Gupta and Adisu Demisi give you the inside track on the politics of sports.
I just want to take back what I said about the Bills. No, because in all honesty, your team seems to have gotten the vaccination thing right. Okay. My team seems to be struggling with it.
These shows and many more from Valor Media Network prove that you don't have to be an asshole to connect with young men today. Subscribe to Valor Media Network today. In our last conversation, one of the things that the audience reacted most to was your highlighting some of the wilder conspiracy theories, which are really kind of, we're insulated from them, but they really have salience in not just the fringe, but they've penetrated the mainstream of MAGA and even of this White House. Can you give this audience a sense of some of the crazier conspiracy theories that are now being spoken of openly in MAGA and possibly even in the White House?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, one thing is the sort of the RFK Make America Healthy Again movement. This fixation, they hate seed oils, right? So they hate soybean oil, they hate canola oil, and so when Steak and Shake, which is sort of a MAGA now leaning Midwestern food chain and fast food chain, they said, okay, we're ditching the seed oils in our French fries. Now, in truth, they still were cooking with them. But this has reached a point. RFK Jr. went to Steak and Shake now, and this is a really hot exclusive I'm going to break here. The HHS cafeteria in a week or two is going to start serving the French fries from Steak and Shake in beef tallow for a little bit. I think it's a temporary thing, but this is one example. This idea of these like kind of secret impurities, and if only there were. This is the key way, I'm sure, to make French fries healthy for you.
Well, great, because we all need healthier French fries. I keep asking this, and everyone seems to think it's right around the corner, but when does the fever break? If it wasn't January 6th, I threw up my hands after that and like, look, if that couldn't do it, I don't know what will. But what does it take to impose reality on a cult?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I think my colleague Sarah Longwell at the Bulwark, I mean, she's running all these focus groups, and she says, roughly 32% of the electorate is never going to leave Trump. They love him so much. And so what can we do? I mean, or the question is like, what's going to happen to that, that additional perhaps 18% or so that voted for him? And I think the reality is the only thing that's going to happen is like a really serious economic downturn would be because apparently people, as you said, didn't care that much about January 6th. They didn't. And I think there's this right-wing media apparatus, and I would include with that, not just Fox, but so many of these podcasts and kind of like more lifestyle shows where the hosts are very like reflexively Republican now, that there's just such a, I think it's hard for people who aren't like really keyed into news to get it in a way that doesn't have right-wing spin on it anymore. But I think the one thing that can change that is something like inflation or losing your job. And so I think, that appears to be where we're headed, right? With the tariffs and everything. And so I think we'll see. I listened to a focus group Sarah Longwell did with Trump voters. And the one thing that I think they kept saying was like, well, I don't know about the economy. And so that does seem to be reaching them.
I listened to that one too. And I mean, you both had that reaction to it. They were still like, I love Trump. And this was on the heels of the third term focus group, right? But there were some cracks, which was a hopeful sign, and it all revolved around the economy. Will, where can people find you and the False Flag Substack? Yeah,
sure. So I'm on X, Blue Sky, all that good stuff at Will Sommer, SOMMER. And my newsletter is called False Flag, and it's at thebulwark.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Will.
Thanks for having me.
New Midas merch drop. Check out the latest pro-democracy sticker packs, t-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, and more. All at store.MeidasTouch.com.